Chapter 1, Emmy Group, Human Resources Department. The HR personnel slid a form across the desk to Willow Nightingale, who was waiting patiently. Without looking up, she said, "Just get Mr. Sterling to sign this, and you can officially resign after 1 more month." "Does it have to be Mr. Sterling?" Willow asked, her voice tinged with hesitation as she took the form. But her last glimmer of hope was dashed when the HR staffer finally looked up and answered curtly, "Of course, you're Mr. Sterling's personal secretary. His signature is mandatory. Is there a problem?" With nothing more to say, Willow could only shake her head and walk out of the HR office. Shane Sterling's office was on the top floor. She took the elevator up, but even as the doors opened, she still hesitated in front of his office. After a soft knock, Willow pushed the door open. The first thing she saw was a woman in a chic designer dress sitting on the lap of the impeccably dressed Shane Sterling, locked in a passionate kiss. She froze for a second before her expression returned to its usual calm. She walked straight to his desk. "Mr. Sterling, I have a document here that needs your signature." Only then did the two, still entwined, seem to notice her presence. They reluctantly pulled apart, and Willow finally got a clear look at the woman's face. It was Penelope Sinclair, the heiress to the Sinclair Group and a frequent visitor to the CEO's office this past month. Penelope leaned coyly against Shane. "These high heels are killing me. My legs hurt so much." "Then I'll have someone massage them for you," Shane said, his tone doting. But when his gaze shifted to Willow, both his eyes and his voice turned to ice. "What are you still standing there for? Get over here and massage Penny's legs." Penelope let out a soft cry, feigning embarrassment. "Oh, I couldn't possibly ask her to do that." But there wasn't a trace of reluctance on her face. Willow didn't move. She was Shane's secretary, but massaging his mistress's legs was not in her job description. Seeing her stand motionless, he seemed to understand. He let out a sneer, pulled a thick wad of cash from a drawer, and threw it hard in her face. She turned to dodge, but the sharp edge of a bill still grazed her cheek, leaving a thin, red line. "Is this enough? Isn't money all you care about?" The man's disgusted voice rang in her ears, a stinging pain spreading across her cheek. She moved her lips, wanting to say something, but in the end, she gave up. She silently knelt and began to gently massage Penelope's legs. She didn't know how long she massaged them before Penelope finally smiled and pulled her legs back. "That's enough, Shane. Didn't you book that romantic French restaurant for us? It's time to go." A doting smile played on Shane's lips. "Of course," he said, getting up and taking her hand to lead her out of the office. Seeing them about to leave, Willow quickly grabbed her resignation form and hurried after them. "Mr. Sterling, this document needs your signature." Shane frowned and reached for it, about to take a closer look. But Penelope whined beside him. "Shane, hurry up, I'm starving." Hearing this, Shane didn't give it another thought and simply signed his name at the bottom of the document. With the signature done, he left without a second glance, completely missing the look of profound relief that washed over Willow's face. "Shane Sterling, I can finally leave you." Her phone rang at that exact moment. Willow answered, and a gentle male voice came through the receiver. "Willow, the wedding preparations are underway. How much longer until you're back?" Willow looked at the resignation form in her hand. "I've just settled the paperwork. I have 1 more month." Though he had his answer, the man on the other end didn't hang up. After a long pause, he asked softly, "Willow, do you feel wronged marrying me? I mean, your ex-boyfriend was a big shot like Shane Sterling. Everyone knew how much he loved you." His words felt like a giant hand squeezing her heart. 6 years ago, her boyfriend was indeed Shane Sterling. Back then, he hadn't made his fortune yet. They were squeezed into a tiny, rented apartment, living the most ordinary of lives. He didn't have a lot of money to give her, but he gave her an endless amount of love. With him, fruit was always peeled, fish was always deboned, and there was always an umbrella in her bag when it rained. He showered her with little surprises, and after countless nights of passionate lovemaking, he would hold her tight and swear he would save up a lot of money to marry her. He was still playing esports then, and to build a future for her, he even took on jobs boosting other players' accounts, sleeping only 2 hours a day, nearly working himself to death. But she had brutally broken up with him at the very moment he loved her most. She remembered the heavy rain that night as she pried his fingers from her arm, one by one, her eyes cold and merciless. "Shane Sterling, with you, All I have is this cramped little apartment. I can't even afford a dress I like, just look at it over and over before giving up. I've had enough of this life. I'm begging you, let me go. She had gotten into the car that came for her, umbrella in hand. Through the rear-view mirror, she could see him stumbling after the car, his choked sobs pleading with her not to leave, telling her over and over that he loved her, begging her to just wait a little longer. Tears streamed down her face as she sat in the luxury car. But she never once looked back, because right before that, she had been diagnosed with cancer. Their life was already so difficult, and now she had cancer. Even though it wasn't terminal, the cost of treatment would have been enough to crush him. She didn't want to be a burden, so she could only leave him this way. It was her own way of saving him. After that, she went abroad, working part-time jobs to pay for her treatment. At her lowest, she ate leftovers from customers' plates and slept in the damp, dark storage room of the restaurant where she worked. After a long, stumbling battle of treatments and relapses, she finally clawed her life back. When she returned to the country, she applied for a secretarial position at a high-paying corporation. She never expected that corporation to be Shane Sterling's company. It was only after she got home that she searched his name and learned what had happened in the 4 years she was gone. How Shane had gone from a booster to a famous esports star, and then to a powerful tycoon who had single-handedly built the gaming empire that was Emmy Group. Without Willow Nightingale, he had indeed become better. But when they met again, all she saw in his eyes besides shock was disgust. He hated her. After joining Emmy, she became Shane's personal secretary, her office separated from his by a single wall. Others envied her for getting the best office, but only she knew he did it on purpose. From there, she could see the women he brought to his office change every 3 days. She could see him being intimate with them. She was the first person he could call over to make one humiliating demand after another. If she refused, he would, just as he had today, pull out a wad of cash, throw it in her face, and say, "Is this enough? Isn't money all you want?" He deliberately made her witness his intimacy with other women, tormenting and humiliating her. Yet on nights when he was drunk, he would show up at her door with red-rimmed eyes, burying his face in her neck and asking in a choked voice, "Willow Nightingale, do you even have a heart?" Willow didn't know if Shane was torturing her or himself. In that moment, she thought that perhaps their toxic bond would only end when one of them finally settled down for good. So, a while ago, she had gone back to her hometown for a blind date. Her date was her high school classmate, Finn Bridger. He wasn't wealthy, but he was dependable and conventional. They got along well, and it felt natural to get engaged. They agreed to get married in a month. From now on, she would let Shane go, and she hoped he would let her go too. From this day forward, they would be strangers in a crowd, with no debts to each other. Chapter 2, her thoughts snapped back from her memories to the present. Her voice was soft as she spoke into the phone. "Finn, my decision to marry you wasn't on a whim, nor was I forced into it. The moment I broke up with Shane 6 years ago, I had already decided to let him go. You don't have to worry about that. I'll build a good life with you." His voice on the other end was still gentle. "Okay, I'll handle the wedding preparations here. Don't rush, just come back when you've wrapped things up over there." Willow nodded and hung up the phone. She returned to her desk with the signed resignation form and began the process of handing over her work. It was late by the time she got home. Exhausted in body and mind, she washed up and collapsed into bed. She had just lain down when her phone rang. She answered, and Shane's voice came through. "Penny wants some of those sweet rice dumplings from the place on the south side. Go buy some and bring them to the hotel." His words instantly shattered her sleepiness. The shop on the south side was far from her place. Even if she left now, it would take nearly 4 hours to buy them and deliver them to the hotel. But he hung up quickly, giving her no chance to refuse. Besides, even though her resignation was in motion, she was still his secretary for the next month. With a sigh, she resigned herself to her fate, got out of bed, changed her clothes, and went to buy the sweet rice dumplings. 4 hours later, when Willow delivered the dumplings to the hotel Shane had specified, they were completely cold. Penelope merely touched the bowl, not even bothering to taste it before turning away in disgust. "They're cold. They're no good anymore. Shane, how about this? Why don't you have her go buy me some of those date cakes from the East End?" At her words, Shane immediately looked at Willow, ordering her to go and buy them. Willow had no room to refuse. She could only drag her exhausted body out once more. But when she returned with the date cakes, Penelope took one bite and tossed it aside with a look of extreme distaste. "This is awful. Just go get the takoyaki from the North End instead. This isn't good. Go buy the rice cakes from the West End." After several more back and forth trips, Willow finally bought something that satisfied Penelope. Just as she was about to breathe a sigh of relief and head home, Shane stopped her, his voice laced with a strange, suggestive tone. "Hold on, go buy a dozen boxes of condoms." The word condoms made Willow's face freeze instantly. After a long moment, she managed a dry reply, "The hotel has them. The hotel doesn't have the kind Penny likes." He paused, his voice soft and slightly mocking. "And you should know my size." Willow's face went pale. Fearing he would say something even more humiliating if she stayed, she turned and left immediately. Fortunately, there was a supermarket near the hotel. She quickly picked out the condoms and brought them up. But even after she delivered them, he refused to let her leave. "Stand guard outside." After being run ragged for so long, Willow's face was etched with exhaustion. She no longer had the strength to argue with them. She could only stand silently outside the door, listening to the endless sounds of their lovemaking from within. Perhaps it was due to her extreme fatigue, but as her consciousness began to blur, she suddenly remembered a time long ago, in their tiny apartment. They would hold each other, kiss, and do all the intimate things that couples do. Every night, his breath would fall on her skin, his movements both inexperienced and teasing. She would carefully respond to his advances, holding him tightly. But that was all in the past now. Everything had changed after that fateful turn of events. The person who could now be so intimately entangled with him would never be her again. From the day she started at Emmy, Shane's girlfriends had come and gone, none lasting more than 3 days. But Penelope seemed to have been by his side for a month now. As an heiress, she was a good match for him. He probably wouldn't replace her. And as for her, she was going back to her hometown to marry someone else. She hoped that from now on, they would go their separate ways and each find their own happiness. Chapter 3, Willow stood outside the door all night, listening. Just as she was about to doze off, the door was suddenly pulled open from the inside. Her consciousness snapped back. She turned her head to see Penelope, nestled in Shane's arms, walking out of the room. They were intimate, wrapped in a lingering, amorous haze. Both were in bathrobes, their collars hanging loosely, revealing a dense cluster of Hickey's proof of how intense their night had been. At the same moment she saw them, they saw her, still standing guard outside the door. Shane's eyes locked onto her. "You didn't leave for a single moment?" "No." After a night on duty, Willow had already composed herself. She shook her head, her expression showing no trace of anything unusual. Her reaction, however, did not seem to please him. He looked furious. "Willow Nightingale, you really know how to endure." Willow's expression remained placid. Of course, she could endure. She used to be unable to let go of Shane, but now that she was about to get married, she only saw him as her boss. Her superior's private life was none of her business. "Mr. Sterling, if there's nothing else, I'll be leaving now." She was about to leave after saying this, but something she said seemed to enrage Shane even further. His face darkened. He lunged forward and grabbed her hand, his grip so tight his knuckles turned white. "Did I say you could leave? Tonight is Penny's birthday. Go and organize a lavish birthday party for her." Willow hadn't slept all night, and now she was being assigned another demanding task. Logically, she should have refused, should have fought back. But looking into his eyes, which seemed to be blazing with fire, she paused for a moment and then numbly accepted the task. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. Just 29 more days," she thought. "Then it will all be over." The door slammed shut with a loud bang, startling Willow, who was left standing outside. She couldn't understand what he was so angry about. She turned and walked towards the elevator. Willow spent the entire day running around, and by the time the party was finally set up, she was exhausted. The party began with Shane leading Penelope onto the dance floor for the opening dance. They moved in perfect sync, whispering intimately as they twirled across the floor, one advancing as the other retreated. After the dance came the gift-giving. A magnificent 7-tiered cake was wheeled in. With a look of deep affection, Shane presented his gift. It was a diamond necklace that was clearly priceless at a single glance. The pendant was a perfectly polished fluorite stone, its deep, sea like teal color mesmerizing. The moment it was revealed, gasps of astonishment rippled through the crowd. Isn't that the heart of the ocean that was bought by a mysterious tycoon for millions of dollars at auction a while ago? So Mr. Sterling was the one who bought it. Giving such an expensive gift, it seems Mr. Sterling is really serious this time. Did you see how tender and intimate he was with Miss Sinclair during the opening dance? I bet wedding bells will be ringing soon. As the guests buzzed with discussion, Shane stood at the front with Penelope's hand in his. His deep voice, amplified by the microphone, spread throughout the venue. I have another piece of happy news to announce here today. I am getting engaged to the heiress of the Sinclair family. The announcement was sudden, yet it was what all the guests had expected. Standing silently in a corner, Willow watched Shane and Penelope standing side by side. She wasn't sure if it was her imagination, but she felt that as he announced the engagement, his eyes glanced in her direction. But she quickly dismissed the thought. He hated her so much, why would he ever look at her? Willow stopped thinking about it. A crowd had already gathered around Shane and Penelope, with endless congratulations and a growing line of people wanting to toast them. Drinking too much isn't good for you, Shane said, stopping Penelope's hand as she was about to raise her glass. He then turned his gaze to Willow. Come here, Penny can't drink, you'll drink for her. Presented with the glass, Willow said nothing. She simply took it with composure, put on a perfectly appropriate smile, and downed the contents in one go. There were far too many people toasting them. She must have had dozens of glasses, and her stomach felt like it was on fire. Yet Shane seemed to be torturing her on purpose, dragging her all over the banquet hall. She could only drink until she threw up, only to come back and drink more. After more than an hour of drinking, the party finally ended. As the crowd slowly dispersed, she, pale-faced, took out her phone to call a cab home. But just then, it buzzed with a notification. It was a message from Finn Bridger. Willow opened it to see several photos, some of wedding dresses, others of a new home. His call came through right after. Willow, I've picked out a few wedding dresses. Which one do you like? And the house, is this one okay? She glanced briefly at the photos he sent. The pain in her stomach made it impossible to focus and choose carefully. She could only reply softly. The dresses are all nice, you can just pick one. The house is fine too, I don't have any objections. Just as the words left her mouth, Shane's grim voice came from behind her. What house? Chapter 4, Willow instinctively hung up the phone and turned to hide it behind her back. She could hear her own heart thumping loudly in her ears. After a moment of stammering, she managed to come up with an excuse to deflect his question. One of my younger cousins back home is getting married. She was just asking for my opinion. Fortunately, he didn't press further. He just raised an eyebrow, his voice still as cold and emotionless as ever. Get in the car. I'll take you home. Don't embarrass yourself here. That's all right, Get in. Hearing his firm tone, Willow swallowed the refusal that was about to escape her lips and silently followed him to the car. Shane and Penelope were in the back, so she had to sit in the front passenger seat. The area where she lived was quite remote, and the farther the car drove, the more deserted the surroundings became. After a while, Penelope's voice cried out from the back seat. Shane, I think I left my purse at the banquet hall. Can you take me back to get it, please? Through the rearview mirror, Willow's gaze met Shane's. He looked away instantly, as if he'd been burned, and the words tumbled out of his mouth. Okay, I'll take you back to get it. I knew you were the best to me. Penelope's face lit up with a smile. But after saying that, she looked hesitantly at Willow in the front. But if you're taking me back, what about Miss Nightingale? We can't just have her come back with us, can we? Being suddenly mentioned, a chill went down Willow's spine. She had a sinking feeling about what he would say next, and his words confirmed her premonition. Get out. Take a cab home yourself. Suppressing the I knew it feeling that rose within her, she said nothing and simply nodded in compliance. When the car pulled over to the side of the road, she got out immediately. The moment the door closed, the car started up again and sped off, kicking up a cloud of dust. Willow coughed twice, waving the dust away from her face. She looked around at her surroundings and lamented her bad luck. To be stranded in such a desolate place, she would probably have to walk back. If this had happened earlier while they were still in the city, she could have at least hailed a cab. She heaved a deep sigh. The ride-sharing app on her phone showed no available cars. With a blizzard raging, waiting here was not a wise choice. She had no option but to start walking. She hadn't been walking for more than half an hour when things got even worse. The familiar stomach pain began to spread throughout her body. The area was still completely deserted. Her face pale, she forced herself to keep walking, but the pain grew more and more intense. Before she could get much farther, her vision went black, and she collapsed into the thick snow, losing consciousness completely. When she woke up, Willow found herself in a warm room. Next to her was Shane, his face grim. Seeing her awake did nothing to improve his expression. He simply tossed a paper report at her. "You're young, but you've already wrecked your stomach. Are you trying to make it look like I abuse my employees?" Hearing him mention her stomach, Willow's heart leaped in alarm. She didn't even have time to answer him before she snatched up the report and frantically scanned it. Only after confirming that it didn't mention her history with cancer did she secretly breathe a sigh of relief. Willow finally had a moment to look around. She realized she was in Shane's house and quickly asked, "Mr. Sterling, why am I at your house?" He remained stone-faced but answered her question. "Someone found you collapsed on the roadside and called your pinned contact. That was me." As he said this, his voice faltered, and a tremor of hoarseness entered his tone. "Willow Nightingale, am I still your pinned contact?" Chapter 5. It was only then that Willow remembered she had never unpinned him all these years. Hearing the coldness in his voice, she thought he was accusing her of something and quickly took out her phone to unpin him right in front of him. "Sorry, I forgot to unpin you." She thought this would satisfy him, but his face suddenly grew even darker. He stared at her with a cold smile, then turned without another word and slammed the door on his way out. Willow couldn't understand why she had made him angry again. She got up, walked to the door, and pushed it open, ready to leave. Just then, a stream of water shot directly at her face. It happened so suddenly that she had no time to dodge. In an instant, she was drenched to the bone. After wiping the water from her face, she saw who was standing in front of her. Penelope, holding a garden hose. Penelope looked at Willow with a face full of apology, but her eyes glinted with the triumph of a successful prank. She smiled sweetly. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Miss Nightingale. I was watering the flowers and didn't see you. Are you okay? Let me take you to change your clothes." With that, she grabbed Willow's arm and pulled her into a bedroom. The moment she stepped into the bedroom, Willow froze, stunned by the room's layout. It was identical to the dream home she and Shane had imagined together before they broke up. The warm-toned decor, the furniture arrangement, even the flowers in the corner and on the windowsill were exactly the same. Back then, they were both poor and couldn't afford a house. But his favorite thing to do was to hold her, bury his head in her neck, and say, "Willow, when we get married, I'll buy a huge house for us. The room will be decorated in your favorite lavender, and there'll be a big sofa where we can cuddle together. And we'll have your favorite spider plants on the windowsill." He had said those words so many times that, even after 4 years, she could still clearly remember the look on his face when he said them. Shane's words were still echoing in her ears when Penelope's voice broke through her memories. "Shane said this is our marital home. I'll be moving in soon. Miss Nightingale, I've seen plenty of women like you. You're just a social climber, aren't you? I'm warning you, you'd better drop those little ideas of yours." Willow composed herself, pulling back from her memories until her face was nothing but calm. "That's not my intention. Stop pretending. I know all about it. You're the one who abandoned Shane all those years ago. You were a gold digger back then, dumping him because he was poor. Now that he's rich and powerful, you come crawling back. Aren't you shameless? He bled for every step he took to get where he is today. If you have any sense, you'll leave now and stop disturbing his peaceful life." Her words were harsh, but Willow felt nothing. She was right. She had left him when he was at his lowest. Now that he had become a business tycoon, she certainly shouldn't be disturbing his life. That's why, even after she recovered, Willow had never planned to ask for him back. Joining his company had been a complete accident. She lowered her head, her voice so soft that Penelope, standing in front of her, could barely hear it. "I will leave." Chapter 6. Willow went home alone. After resting for a full day, she finally felt back to normal and returned to her desk at work. She had just sat down when a message from Shane popped up. "Bring me the contract from my desk. I have a meeting in 10 minutes and I need it." She replied with a quick "okay," got up, and went to the CEO's office to get the contract. As she was leaving his office to head to the conference room, she saw several secretaries from the CEO's office walking towards her, looking anxious. "Willow, there's a problem with the food in the cafeteria. Some employees got sick, and we need to open the walk-in freezer to get samples. You have the key, can you take us there?" Willow wanted to deliver the file first and then deal with the cafeteria issue, but they grabbed her and wouldn't let go, insisting that the employees were on strike and it had to be handled immediately. She checked the time. Figuring she still had enough, she went with them to the freezer. The moment she used the key to open the door and was about to let them in, she felt a force from behind shove her hard. By the time she stumbled a few steps and regained her balance, the door had been locked from the outside. The temperature inside the walk-in freezer was frigid. Because the office was air-conditioned, they usually wore thin clothing. Her light attire offered no protection against the biting cold, and she began to shiver uncontrollably. She ran to the door and pounded on the metal surface. The loud bang, bang, bang echoed in the small space, and a wave of panic washed over her. "What are you doing? Let me out." The door wasn't very soundproof, so she could clearly hear the laughter of the secretaries outside. "Miss Sinclair wanted us to teach you a lesson. You can just stay in there for a while. Don't worry, we won't actually let you freeze to death." As the voice faded, she could faintly hear their footsteps retreating. Her calls for help were useless. She pulled out her phone to call for help, but when the screen lit up, the words "no service" at the top filled her with despair. The bone-chilling cold seeped through her exposed skin and spread throughout her body. All she could do was curl up in a corner, hugging herself tightly in a futile attempt to slow the loss of body heat. Eventually, even her shivering grew weaker. She didn't know how much time had passed. Her consciousness was already fading when the freezer door was finally opened again. She remained huddled on the floor, thinking it was just a hallucination before she froze to death. It wasn't until a woman peeked into the freezer and saw no movement that she cautiously called out, her voice laced with guilt and fear. "Mandy, the door's open. Why isn't she coming out? Did something really happen?" The woman called Mandy trembled as she replied, "How should I know? Go check on her, quick." Only then did someone enter and find Willow, a layer of white frost already formed on her eyelashes. They quickly carried her out. Back in the warmth, she began to feel sensation return to her stiff limbs. Seeing that she was responsive, the group of secretaries scattered, afraid of being caught by Willow. She stood up, ignoring the secretaries for the moment, and glanced at her phone. It had been an hour and a half since Shane's 10-minute deadline. Panic seized her. Though she hadn't fully recovered from the extreme cold, she forced herself to stand, grab the file, and walk towards the conference room. By the time she rushed in, the room was empty except for a grim-faced Shane Sterling and a smiling Penelope Sinclair, who was clearly waiting to enjoy the show. Seeing her arrive, Shane grabbed a nearby coffee cup and threw it at her, his voice filled with undisguised rage. "Willow Nightingale, do you have any idea what time it is?" Willow was trembling all over. Her body temperature hadn't returned to normal, and her reflexes were slow. She could only watch as the coffee cup shattered at her feet, sending fragments flying. Shards grazed her calf, leaving behind a spatter of bloody marks. She forced herself to endure the pain and explained, "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling. I didn't do it on purpose. Miss Sinclair had someone lock me in the walk-in freezer. They just let me." But her instinctive explanation sounded like a lame excuse for negligence to him, and his anger surged even higher. "Willow Nightingale, do you think I'd believe you? Do you think Penny is as vicious as you are?" He slammed the file against her body, but hearing his words, she lost her focus and forgot to even dodge the file he threw at her. She opened her mouth, but for a moment, she was speechless. He was right. In Shane's mind, she was indeed the most vicious woman. Chapter 7, a bitter smile touched Willow's lips. She lowered her head, no longer trying to explain, and silently knelt to pick up the scattered papers. As a tense silence filled the room, it was Penelope, who had been sitting demurely by Shane's side, who finally spoke up to smooth things over by arranging for Willow to be transferred away from him. "Miss Nightingale seems distracted from her work lately. I happen to be preparing some things for the wedding. Why don't we have her assist me for a while?" Shane, still simmering with anger, seized on Penelope's suggestion without a second thought. He didn't even glance at Willow or ask for her opinion before agreeing. From that day on, she was assigned to Penelope, who seemed to take a special pleasure in tormenting her. She made her peel chestnuts with her bare hands until her 10 fingers were stained with blood. She made her pull the thorns off rose stems with her bare hands. She sent her out in the middle of the night to buy things, then flew into a rage if they weren't exactly to her liking. One day, after finishing the tasks Penelope had given her, Willow was sitting exhausted in a corner, silently checking the countdown on her phone. She breathed a sigh of relief when she saw there were only 7 days left until she could leave. But the next second, Shane's voice sounded from behind her. "What are you looking at?" Willow turned to see Shane's grim face. She shook her head and said only 2 words, "It's nothing." Shane frowned, sensing something was off. If he wasn't mistaken, he had just seen a countdown. What was she counting down to? Before he could ask, Penelope's voice called out from a distance. "Miss Nightingale, I'm trying on my wedding dress. Come and help me." Willow glanced at Shane. Seeing no further instructions from him, she hurried towards the fitting room. She pulled back the curtain and went inside to see Penelope already in her wedding dress, waiting for her to do up the zipper on the back. She walked over quickly, about to raise her hand. But before her fingers even touched the zipper, Penelope suddenly cried out. "Ah, that hurts," Willow froze. Only then did she see the deep, bloody scratch left by the zipper on Penelope's back. Before she could process what had happened, Shane, hearing the cry, burst in from outside. When he saw the wound on Penelope's back, his face changed drastically. He rushed to her side. "What happened?" "Shane, don't blame Miss Nightingale. She didn't mean to," Penelope put on a tearful, pitiful expression. Although she seemed to be defending Willow, her words effectively sealed Willow's guilt. And after hearing her, Shane immediately turned to Willow with a cold glare. "Didn't mean to. I think she did it on purpose. Willow Nightingale, last time you slandered Penny, she didn't hold it against you. She even had you transferred to her side because she was afraid you'd be punished for your mistake. Is this how you repay her? Get out and stand outside. Don't come back in until you've realized your mistake." His words stabbed her like daggers. She knew that no matter how much she explained, Shane wouldn't believe her, so she silently endured his wrath. But she couldn't understand why Penelope would do this. They were about to get married, and she would be leaving soon anyway. Even if Penelope didn't do these things, Shane would still be her husband. There was no longer any possibility between them. It was pouring rain outside. Dressed in her thin work attire, Willow was quickly soaked to the bone. The chill seeped into her, and through the brightly lit window, she could clearly see the scene inside the room. She watched him gently apply medicine to Penelope's wound. She watched them pick a movie together after, cuddling on the sofa to watch it. She watched them kiss when the moment grew tender. Under the torrential rain, Willow's body swayed, and she finally collapsed to the ground, unable to stand any longer. Memories of the past flooded her mind. She remembered him saying, "My Willow is the best Willow in the world." She remembered him, unable to afford movie tickets, huddling with her on their tiny sofa, watching an outdated movie on a cracked, lagging phone. She remembered how he had stayed up for countless nights boosting accounts to earn money after seeing her reluctantly put down a bracelet that was expensive for them then, but laughably cheap now. He had carefully presented it to her, saying, "Willow, one day I'll give you the best of everything." She had survived every unbearable night of working and fighting her illness in a foreign country by clinging to those memories. But now, she was personally burying those memories deep within her, letting the downpour wash them away. From this day forward, no more thoughts, no more memories. Let the past truly become the past. Chapter 8, after being soaked in the rain, Willow came down with a high fever the next day and had to take a few days off. During that time, once her fever had subsided a bit, she moved out of her apartment. Then, she gathered all the things related to Shane that she had collected over the years and sold them online. Thanks to Shane's fame, everything was sold almost as soon as she listed it. As she watched the items she once treasured get sold off one by one, the memories associated with them faded away, scattered to the wind. Once she had rested enough, Willow returned to the company. Today was her last day. She had brought her suitcase with her, ready to head to the airport as soon as the paperwork was done. Upon arriving at her desk, she handed over all her work responsibilities, her ID badge, and her access card. Just as she was finishing the process and about to leave, she received a long list from Shane. It was followed by a single, commanding sentence. Buy everything on this list and have it delivered to the villa by the end of the day. Willow glanced at the list. It was long, filled with jewelry, dresses, shoes, and various luxury brand bags. She was about to refuse when her phone pinged with a new message. She opened it and saw it was from Finn Bridger. Willow, you're coming back today, right? Do you want me to pick you up? No need, I can manage on my own. How are the wedding preparations coming along? Everything's ready, we're just waiting for you. At the mention of the wedding, Finn's replies came faster, tinged with a happy energy. When Willow politely replied, "You've worked hard," he sent back another message. "It's not hard at all, it's what I should be doing." He paused, then sent a very solemn message. "Willow, for the rest of our lives, I'm in your care." Having not received a reply, Shane left his office with a cold expression, intending to confront her. But when he arrived at the secretarial area, he saw Willow sitting at her desk, engrossed in a chat on her phone. As he got closer, he saw a man's profile picture on the screen. It felt like a bottle of soda had suddenly been shaken up inside him. A torrent of sour, repressed, jealous emotions surged through him, making his voice rise. "Willow, Nightingale, didn't I send you a list to buy today? Why are you still here chatting?" Willow looked up abruptly, only then remembering she had forgotten to reply to Shane. She stood up, intending to explain that she had already resigned. "Mr. Sterling, you should give this task to someone else. I've already—" Before she could finish, Shane's phone rang. He didn't even look at her. Seeing the name on the screen, he answered the call and walked away. "Penny, I'll be right there." Seeing him leave in a hurry, a colleague finally dared to approach Willow and whisper, a look of surprise in her eyes. "Willow, what's going on? Doesn't Mr. Sterling know you've resigned? How did he sign off on it then?" Willow thought back to the day he signed the form and couldn't help but give a self-deprecating smile. Shane indeed had no idea she was resigning. When she gave him the form, he was preoccupied with his dinner date with Penelope and had signed it without even looking. She didn't answer, and her colleague didn't dwell on it, moving on to another question. "Why did you suddenly decide to resign?" She smiled, not trying to hide anything. "I'm going back home to get married. My hometown is too far, so I won't be able to invite you all to the wedding feast, but I bought some wedding candy for everyone to enjoy." With that, she took out the candy she had bought in advance and began to hand it out. When she was done, there was one bag left. Her gaze drifted towards the now empty CEO's office. After a moment's thought, she pushed the door open, walked in, and placed the last bag of candy on his desk. "Shane Sterling, from now on, we will not see each other, think of each other, or owe each other anything." After doing this, she picked up her suitcase, walked out of the Emmy Group building, and never looked back. Chapter 9. When Shane returned to the company after dealing with Penelope's matter, Willow was no longer at her desk. He glanced around. Everyone else seemed to be working as usual, so he assumed she had gone to complete the task he had assigned her and went straight back to his office. A brightly colored red bag of wedding candy on his desk made him pause. The simple packaging made it clear that this wasn't something Willow would have prepared for his and Penelope's wedding. Then, what is this? He suddenly remembered seeing similar bags of candy on other people's desks. Frowning, he walked out of his office again. For the CEO to visit the small secretarial office 3 times in such a short period, many hearts started to pound, fearing he had come to reprimand someone. To their surprise, he walked straight to Willow's former desk. Seeing the wedding candy on the neighboring colleague's desk, he spoke. "Whose is this, and where is Willow Nightingale?" The young woman looked confused, but it was the boss asking, so she answered truthfully. "Willow gave us this candy. She has already resigned. She said she's going back to her hometown to get married." Her words hit him like a clap of thunder, leaving a ringing in his ears. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. Resigned, married. Impossible. He returned to his office with a dark expression, picked up the internal phone, and dialed the HR department. "Willow Nightingale has resigned?" He still couldn't believe it. The first thing he did when the call connected was to confirm it again. It wasn't until HR gave a definite affirmative that he asked in disbelief, his voice full of accusation. "She's my personal secretary. Her resignation requires my signature. How could I not know about her resignation? And she's getting married?" His barely suppressed anger reached the HR staffer on the other end, who felt utterly wronged. She had followed all the procedures. A secretary's resignation required their superior's signature. She hadn't made any special exceptions for Willow. Willow had indeed brought in a resignation form with Shane's signature, which is why she had processed it. But she couldn't complain to the CEO. She could only compose herself, take a deep breath, and say, "Mr. Sterling, the resignation form Miss Nightingale submitted a month ago had your signature on it." Her simple sentence left Shane speechless. His mind raced, but he couldn't recall Willow ever coming to him to sign a resignation form. But then, something clicked. A month ago, he had a candlelight dinner with Penelope. Before leaving, he had signed a document Willow handed him. That was the only document he had ever signed without reading. So, Willow was really gone. His gaze fell back on the red bag of candy on his desk. His face went pale. She had really gone back to marry someone else? No, I won't allow it. How could she marry someone else without my permission? His breathing grew ragged with anger. He only knew which city her hometown was in, but not the specific address. He wanted to find her, but he didn't know where to look. Miss Nightingale's address? Let me see. I remember we fill out a detailed address when we join the company. Without realizing it, Shane had spoken his thoughts aloud. Hearing that he wanted to find Willow, the HR staffer, fearing he might blame them for the earlier incident, quickly started searching through the files, hoping to make up for the mistake. As she searched, she couldn't help but feel a little strange. Aren't Mr. Sterling and the Sinclair heiress's wedding just around the corner? Why is he suddenly looking for Miss Nightingale? If I remember correctly, Miss Nightingale's hometown is quite far away. Despite her thoughts, her hands didn't stop moving. She quickly found the information sheet Willow had filled out when she joined, and sure enough, found a detailed address. She immediately took a photo and sent it to Shane. Oh well, she thought, I'm just an employee. It's not my place to get involved in the boss's personal drama. Chapter 10, with Willow's detailed home address in hand, Shane immediately had someone book him a ticket for the next flight to L City. After arriving in L City, he took a train, then a bus. After a long and tiring journey, he finally arrived at the small town where her family lived the next morning. The town was mostly populated by elderly people, and since it wasn't a tourist destination, outsiders were rare. The sudden appearance of a man in a sharp suit sparked a wave of discussion. Whose kid is that? He looks so unfamiliar. You old woman, everyone looks unfamiliar to you. Didn't you say the same thing yesterday when that kid from the Nightingale family came back? That's different. I've really never seen this one before. But wasn't it the Nightingale girl's wedding yesterday? Could he be a friend who came for the wedding? Impossible. Who comes to a wedding after the banquet is already over? That's right. And wasn't the Nightingale girl's wedding held in the city? The old folks didn't bother to lower their voices, but they were speaking in a local dialect that Shane couldn't quite understand. He could only make out that they had mentioned a young woman with the surname Nightingale who had just returned yesterday. He quickly connected this to Willow and hurried over to ask, "Excuse me, do you know where the Nightingale family lives?" The elders understood Shane's question, but unfortunately, he couldn't understand their reply. After a bit of back and forth, seeing that he still looked confused, they got tired of trying and called out to a young boy of about 7 or 8, who came running over. After another exchange in the dialect he couldn't understand, the boy, having listened to the elders, turned to Shane and waved. "Big brother, I'll take you there." Shane understood that. He thanked the elders and quickly followed the bouncing little boy. Behind him, he could hear the faint chatter of the old folks, still incomprehensible to him. "See? I told you he was looking for the Nightingale girl. Her friends from the city are all so stylish. Looks like she's done well for herself these past few years." Well, she was one of the few from our town to go to university. After all, the voices faded behind him. The town wasn't large, and it didn't take long for him to reach Willow's family home. The houses in the town were mostly single-family homes. The courtyard and the door were still adorned with festive ribbons and red lanterns. After leading Shane there, the boy bounced away, leaving him standing alone in front of the courtyard. He raised his hand to knock, but hesitated, feeling a pang of fear. He wanted to see Willow, but just by looking at the decorations in the courtyard, he could guess that a happy event had just taken place here. The thought made Shane's eyes well up. He had never imagined that one day she would marry someone else. As he stood there, undecided, the door suddenly creaked open a crack, and a small, fluffy head peeked out. The boy's eyes were wary as he looked at him. "Who are you looking for? What are you doing at my house?" Chapter 11, Thankfully, the boy spoke standard Mandarin, which Shane could understand. He quickly introduced himself. Hearing that he was a friend of his sister, the little boy relaxed his guard, turned back to call his parents over, and then opened the door. "You're here to see Willow?" asked Helen Nightingale, Willow's mother, after hearing his purpose. She shook her head with a smile. "Willow and Finn's wedding was yesterday. She's not here today. She should be at their new home." At that moment, the news of Willow's marriage was finally confirmed. The smile on his face stiffened. He forced a pained grin. "Could you take me to see her, then? I have a few things I want to ask her. I've got some things to attend to at home, so I can't get away." "I'll have Leo take you," Helen said, waving a hand and then pointing to Leo Nightingale, who was sitting quietly nearby. Shane just wanted to see Willow and didn't care who took him, so he nodded. After bidding farewell to Willow's parents, he left with Leo. The new house wasn't in the town. Shane's car was parked at the town entrance. It was Leo's first time in a luxury car, and he curiously touched everything he could reach. Shane didn't stop him and even helped him fasten his seatbelt. With Leo giving directions, the car drove smoothly to the parking lot of the new apartment complex. He followed Leo upstairs, and they stopped at a door. Willow had already received a call from her mother, who told her that Leo was bringing a friend of hers over. While marveling at her mother's trusting nature, she waited by the door. As she waited, she wondered. "A friend of mine?" she thought. She had gone to university in S City, and most of her friends were there. Later, she followed Shane to Z City, and with her years abroad for cancer treatment, she had lost contact with almost all of them. Who would travel so far to find her? Just as she was pondering this, the doorbell rang. She quickly got up to open it. The moment the door opened, a small child, only reaching her waist, threw himself into her arms. "Sis, I missed you so much. We just saw each other yesterday. What's there to miss?" Willow chuckled at Leo's whining. Remembering what her mother had said about a friend, she ruffled his hair and asked, "Didn't you say you came with a big brother? Where is he?" Leo looked up and pointed behind him. When Willow looked, she saw that the doorway was empty. He was puzzled. He peeked his head out and saw Shane with his back to them, looking as if he were about to leave. "Brother Shane, my sister's house is here. Where are you going?" Come on. In Chapter 12, Leo enthusiastically ushered Shane in, completely oblivious to how Willow's body had tensed at the mention of that name. Shane himself didn't know why, but while he was on his way, his mind had been in turmoil. Fixated on a single thought, he had to see Willow. He had to ask her why she had suddenly quit, why she had suddenly married someone else. But now, on the verge of seeing her, his mind suddenly cleared. What am I doing? He and Willow had broken up 4 years ago. Whether she quit her job or married someone else had nothing to do with him. On what grounds was he here to question her about these things? Just as he was about to make a cowardly escape, Willow asked about him, and Leo, seeing him about to leave, called him back. He turned around stiffly. When he looked up and saw Willow's expressionless face, he managed a difficult wave. "Willow Nightingale?" As he followed them inside, Finn Bridger, dressed in casual home clothes, was just coming out of the kitchen. The warm smile on his face faltered for a second when he saw the man behind Willow, but it quickly returned. He invited them to sit at the dining table. "We have a guest. I just made a few simple home-cooked dishes. I hope you don't mind." He turned and went back into the kitchen, emerging a moment later with several plates of food which he set on the table. Seeing this, Willow quickly followed him. "I'll help." Being in the same space with Shane again after her resignation made Willow feel uncomfortable all over. But Finn shook his head, quickly bringing out the last dish. His tone was teasingly familiar as he said, "It's just a few dishes, no need for so many hands. Wife, you just sit back and wait to eat." Finn had never met Shane, but he knew that this sudden visitor was the man Willow had once cherished for years, her first love. He had deliberately called her wife in front of him. He wanted to tell Shane that no matter what they had been through in the past, from this day forward, and for every day to come, Willow would only be his wife. No one was going to take her from him. Even if she had once loved another man deeply, he would slowly, bit by bit, erase every trace that man had left on her heart, until her heart belonged completely and only to him. Shane, of course, heard the challenge in his words, but what made his heart bleed even more was that Willow didn't object to the title. Then again, Shane thought, how ridiculous of me. They were a legally married couple now. It was perfectly reasonable for him to call her his wife. What right did he have to feel any pain over it? No one spoke at the dining table, but it was clear to anyone that the atmosphere was tense and confrontational. Even Leo sensed the strangeness between them, his eyes darting back and forth between the three, though he couldn't pinpoint the source of the odd feeling. After the meal, Finn took Leo downstairs for a walk, leaving the space for Willow and Shane. She walked them to the elevator, and the first thing she said was an apology to him. "I'm sorry, I didn't know he would follow me here." She was annoyed, but Finn simply gave her a generous hug and patted her back, his voice still gentle. "It's not your fault, Willow. You can only control yourself, not where he goes. I trust you. I know you'll handle this." Feeling his warm embrace and unconditional trust, Willow's eyes unexpectedly welled up. The sound of the elevator arriving dinged, and Leo, who had tactfully moved aside, now ran back, waving at her. The elevator doors slowly closed. When she turned around, she saw Shane standing in the doorway, an unreadable expression on his face as he looked in her direction. "Are you really sure about marrying him?" As their eyes met, Shane finally couldn't hold back the question. Willow gave him a strange look and nodded without any hesitation. Her voice traveled with her as she walked, growing closer and then fading away again. By the time she sat down on the living room sofa, she had finished speaking. "Of course, we had a wedding and we're legally married. You know me, I've never been one to make decisions lightly. Whether it was the breakup 4 years ago or the decision to marry Finn 4 years later." Her firm answer made his eyes instantly redden, and his voice took on a choked quality. "Then what about our past? The past, as you said, is just the past. People have to move forward, don't they? Mr. Sterling, you and Miss Sinclair are getting married soon. You shouldn't have come." Willow cut him off before he could finish his question, a reminder that they were no longer the young couple who had nothing but each other and had rushed to a strange city fueled by passion alone. She was married to someone else, and his own wedding was just around the corner. Their past had ended on that rainy night 4 years ago. There was no point in getting entangled again now. Her heartless reply was like a blunt knife, carving one bloody gash after another into his heart, a dull, throbbing pain for which the only cure had already run to someone else. A phone suddenly rang. It was Shane's, lying in the living room. The screen lit up, showing the name Penny. Willow didn't get up, just pointed at his phone. "It's Miss Sinclair. Are you going to answer?" He didn't reply, so she didn't move. The call eventually went to voicemail, and the screen went dark. He remained stubbornly standing at the door. The phone rang again, as if it wouldn't stop until he answered. Both people on either end of the line were equally stubborn. Neither would be the first to back down. The ringing stopped and started again, over and over. Shane's brows furrowed. For the first time, he found Penelope incredibly annoying. In the end, he was the first to give in. He walked over and picked up the phone. Penelope's coy voice came through the receiver, filled with a thick layer of grievance. "Shane, where are you? Why aren't you answering my calls? Our wedding is the day after tomorrow. When are you coming back?" Chapter 13, his anger instantly deflated. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His heart was filled with a profound sense of powerlessness. That's right, his wedding with Penelope was in 2 days. What was the point of running here now? To question an ex-girlfriend he had broken up with 4 years ago about why she married someone else? In their respective timelines, the other person was already a thing of the past. So why had he come here? Shane, are you listening to me?" Penelope's incessant chatter finally ceased as she realized she had been talking to silence. Her voice rose. His thoughts were pulled back to the present. He looked at Willow, who still wore a placid expression, and his straight back suddenly slumped. His voice was hoarse and full of weariness. I'm on a business trip. I'll be back tomorrow." He made up a random excuse to placate Penelope. When he looked back at Willow, his eyes were filled with sorrow. "Can I ask one last question?" Willow hesitated for a moment before nodding. With her permission, he paused, then finally asked the question that had plagued him for 4 long years. "Back then, why did you suddenly leave me?" The reason she had given at the time was that she felt he didn't have money and couldn't provide the life she wanted. Initially, Shane had believed her. In his grief, he had also hated her. That period was incredibly tough, but he was driven by the thought that he had to succeed, to show that woman who only saw money, Willow Nightingale, just how foolish her choice had been. That feeling peaked when she reappeared after 4 years and became his secretary. He assumed she had seen his wealth and wanted to latch onto him again. So he deliberately made things difficult for her, brought different women in front of her, and made her watch him be affectionate with others. He just wanted to test if she still cared. But no matter how many women he paraded in front of her, she always maintained that same calm, unruffled demeanor, as if nothing related to him could stir her interest. So, he changed his tactics. He thought that perhaps only the prospect of his marriage could provoke her jealousy, could finally crack Willow Nightingale's placid expression. So Shane found a new partner, Penelope Sinclair. She loved him, had a good family background, and was a very suitable marriage alliance. In front of Willow, he expressed his desire to settle down and announced to everyone that he was getting engaged to Penelope. But still, she remained as calm as ever, her emotions showing not a single ripple. In a fit of anger, he did something he almost regretted for the rest of his life. He abandoned Willow in the desolate outskirts of the city. When he received a call from a passerby saying she had fainted on the roadside, his heart plummeted. It wasn't until the doctor said she had been drinking too much and had repeatedly forced herself to vomit, which led to her body becoming weak and collapsing from exhaustion and cold, and that she would be fine with some rest but couldn't drink so recklessly anymore, that he felt a sense of relief. Hearing that she was safe, he remembered what the passerby had said on the phone. "I called you because you were her pinned contact." So he was still her pinned contact. His turbulent mood was instantly smoothed over. When she woke up, he had only intended to prove that she was still hung up on him, but instead, she had decisively unpinned him right in front of his face. In that instant, the anger that had just subsided flared up again. He turned and left the room with a grim face. For a moment, he couldn't tell if he was doing all this to anger Willow or to torment himself. He refused to admit that the current Willow Nightingale no longer had any feelings for him. So, even though he knew she wasn't the type to frame or deliberately hurt others, he subconsciously blamed her. It was as if by doing so, he could deceive himself. "See, she still does these things to get your attention, so she must still love you, she can't forget you." But Shane had never imagined that she would suddenly resign, that at this very moment, she would choose to marry someone else. Chapter 14, after a long silence, Willow looked at Shane. The cautious hope in his eyes instantly transported her back to that rainy night 4 years ago. When she told him she wanted to break up, he had looked at her with that same cautious, hopeful expression, asking if he had done something wrong, begging her not to joke about breaking up. Back then, she had cruelly pried his hands off her and resolutely embarked on her lonely journey abroad for treatment. And now, she was just as cruel, shaking her head and refusing to tell him the real answer. "Shane, if you had asked me this question before I decided to marry Finn, or on the day we first met again at Emmy, I might have told you the answer. But there's no need for that now. We both have our own new lives. There's no point in staying trapped in the past." Willow hadn't expected Shane to ask this question, but she thought that if he had asked when she had returned to the country, her cancer cured, her life painstakingly pieced back together, and if he hadn't been entangled with other women, she might have actually told him the truth. She would have told him, "Shane, I spent 4 years abroad fighting a disease. Now, I can finally stand before you again, whole and healthy." If he had been willing to get back together with her then, she would have joyfully thrown herself into his arms and said, "Shane, after 4 years, I'm finally back by your side." Unfortunately, there were no what-ifs. They had, step by step, reached this point. Shane didn't get the answer he wanted, but from her veiled response, his suspicions were more or less confirmed. She really hadn't left because he was poor. She really had been pushed away by his own hands. Shane's eyes turned completely red. He gave a bitter, tragic smile, tears welling up in his eyes before he turned and walked out, defeated. Willow watched his retreating back without trying to stop him. Just as she had said at the beginning, he should never have come to find her. Not long after Shane left, Finn returned to the new house with Leo. Seeing that Shane was gone, he showed no surprise. It was Leo who, not seeing the man, started chattering. "Where did that big brother go? Did he leave? I didn't even get to say goodbye." Finn crouched down to his level, reaching out to pinch his cheek until Leo struggled, his words becoming muffled. All that could be heard was, "Brother-in-law, what are you doing?" Finn, however, didn't relent, playfully squeezing his cheek. "Was that guy really so great that you can't stop thinking about him?" Watching the two of them play, Willow couldn't help but smile. But hearing his last sentence, she scratched the back of her head in embarrassment. He was pointing a finger at her, but she had completely let go of Shane the moment she decided to marry him. There was no way she was still hung up on him. Seeing her brother's pleading gaze, she walked over and patted Finn's shoulder, partly to soothe him and partly to defend herself. "I'm not hung up on him, it was just a farewell. What, are you jealous?" Finn looked away unnaturally. Leo seized the opportunity to free his face from his grasp and hid behind Willow, rubbing his cheek and nodding in agreement. Yeah, brother-in-law is a big jealousy pot. Finally, Finn threw his hands up in surrender. All right, I'm a jealousy pot. I can't win against the two of you. I give up." Chapter 15. The next day was the traditional post-wedding visit to the bride's parents. Willow discussed it with her parents, and they agreed that Leo could sleep over at the new house and they would all go back together the next day. Her parents, Helen and their father, had no objections. They were happy to see their children so close. Why would they stand in the way? The one with an objection, once again, was Finn. Because when evening came, Leo started clamoring to sleep with Willow. "I won't get to see my sister as much anymore when she goes home. I'll see her so much less. I just want to sleep with my sister tonight." Finn, with a dark face, blocked him from the master bedroom, refusing to let him take a single step inside. "Number Willow is my wife now. It's only natural for her to sleep with me. How can a wife not sleep with her husband? If you want to sleep with someone, go find your own wife." Leo was stunned for a moment but quickly retorted, "But I'm still little, I can't get a wife, so I can only have my sister in the end." It was Willow who put a stop to the farce. She first took Leo to the guest room. When he clung to her, begging her to stay with him, she gently reasoned with him. "Leo, you're 12 years old this year. You can't sleep with your sister anymore. A 12-year-old boy is a young man, and you have to understand that boys and girls are different. Besides, don't you sleep by yourself when you're at home?" Willow understood Leo's clinginess. She was 16 years older than him. When she went to university in S-City, he was only 2. When they were younger and their parents were too busy to look after him, it was Willow who had taken on the responsibility of caring for him. She would do her homework while he babbled beside her. In her senior year of high school, he was just starting to walk. The year she graduated and left for university, he was still very young. Knowing he wouldn't see his sister for a long time, he had cried his eyes out. That's why whenever she came home for the holidays, he would love to cling to her and ask her to sleep with him. Later, she went to Z-City with Shane, and then she went abroad. She hadn't been home much. This time, she had just returned and was already married. Although they didn't live far, her primary residence had changed. He was just using his old trick again, but he had forgotten that he was already 12. "Okay." Leo's pouting lips could almost hold a teapot. Willow couldn't help but chuckle. She left a small night light on for him and then got up to leave. When she returned to the master bedroom, Finn had already finished washing up. Seeing her come in, he gave her a smile. Even though it wasn't their first time sharing a bed, seeing him with only a towel wrapped around his waist made her blush. She muttered, "I'm going to go wash up," and darted into the bathroom. Watching her shy retreat, the smile on Finn's face grew wider. The full-length mirror reflected his image, water droplets still clinging to his skin, tracing lines down his well-defined abs. It seemed his plan was a success. He had done it on purpose. Half an hour later, Willow, having finished her shower, carefully opened the bathroom door, peeking out with just her head. Finn, who was sitting on the bed, had already turned his gaze towards her the moment she opened the door. Seeing her dripping wet black hair, he beckoned to her. "All done? Let me dry your hair for you." With that, he expertly grabbed the hairdryer from the side and patted the spot next to him, looking all set and just waiting for her to come over. The blush that had faded after her shower rushed back to her cheeks. She still shuffled towards him and sat down beside him. He first took a dry towel and gently blotted her hair, soaking up some of the water. Then he turned on the hairdryer. Warm air blew from the dryer as his fingers combed through her hair. The soft touch sent a tingle down her scalp. The man with the hairdryer couldn't help but let out a soft chuckle when he saw her ears, which were so red they looked like they might drip blood. It was this chuckle that made Willow suddenly feel a mix of embarrassment and annoyance. She snatched the hairdryer from his hand, sat down to the side with a huff, and turned her back to him, silently drying her own hair until it was completely dry. Finn watched her back, not daring to tease her anymore. He could only look regretfully at the confiscated hairdryer and let out a quiet sigh. Chapter 16. Meanwhile, in Z City. It was noon the next day when Shane returned. He didn't contact Penelope. Instead, he went straight back to the company. But he had barely sat down when Penelope came strutting into his office in her high heels. "Shane, you're back, why didn't you let me know?" Her voice was as coy as ever, but this time, Shane, who had never felt anything before, frowned and instinctively avoided her touch. Penelope, of course, noticed his avoidance. A dark look flashed across her face, but she pretended not to see it, pouting and leaning against him again. "Shane, did something happen on your business trip? You don't seem very happy." Hearing this, he suppressed his discomfort and stopped avoiding her. He shook his head. "It's nothing, just a bit tired." He was indeed tired. The mental exhaustion, combined with the overnight travel, had left him weary. Seeing that his fatigue seemed genuine, Penelope felt a pang of concern and stopped pestering him. "Then let's go get something to eat first. You can rest for a while after." Shane nodded, not refuting her words, and got up to go downstairs with her. The Western food he used to have no feelings about now seemed particularly unappetizing. He ate only a little before putting down his knife and fork. "I'm full. I'm heading up. You can go back on your own later." He pressed his temples, didn't even look at Penelope's reaction, and walked straight out of the restaurant. But he didn't go back to the company. After getting in the car, he sped off in another direction. This was the first time since they had been together that Shane had left Penelope alone in a restaurant midway through a meal. She stared after him in astonishment. Forgetting that she had barely eaten, she hurried after him. As she was about to leave the restaurant, a waiter stopped her. "Miss, you haven't paid yet." Seeing the waiter's wary expression, Penelope felt both angry and humiliated. She had never imagined that she would one day be treated like someone trying to dine and dash. She pulled a card from her purse and threw it at the waiter, telling him to hurry up and charge it. When the waiter respectfully returned the card, she snatched it back and walked out, only to see the tail end of Shane's car disappearing in the distance. Then she looked at the direction he was headed, and her face suddenly froze. That wasn't the direction of Emmy Group, nor was it the direction of the Sterling Villa. If she wasn't mistaken, based on the information she had gathered when she investigated Willow, that was the direction of the low-rent apartment they had once shared. Shane had never been so emotionally transparent in front of Penelope before. At most, he would deliberately act more intimate with her in front of Willow. Perhaps even he hadn't realized that every time he was with her, his gaze was merely looking through her, at Willow. But to just let him go like this, Penelope wasn't willing. She liked Shane. Even if a stream of women came and went from his side, she didn't want to let go. At worst, she would just get rid of all the women around him, just as she had gotten rid of Willow. And now, so what if he was nostalgic for Willow? The woman by his side could only be her. Shane had no idea what was going through Penelope's mind, nor did he have the energy to care. He just suddenly had an overwhelming urge to go back to the low-rent apartment he had once shared with Willow. He took the key hidden under his car seat, walked to the door, and stared at the rusty, dilapidated iron door for a long time. Finally, he used the key to unlock it and push the door open. Chapter 17. The layout of the room was exactly as it had been when he and Willow still lived there. After he had become an esports star and founded his gaming empire, the first thing he did was buy this place. He had kept it exactly as it was before Willow left. The apartment had been sparsely furnished, with almost nothing of value. A tiny, rickety bed, a cheap wooden dressing table, 2 faded plastic stools, and a storage box with a board on top that served as both their desk and dining table. A few small square mirrors pieced together formed their only full-length mirror. That was all they had owned back then. The bed was so small that they had to hold each other tightly to keep from rolling off in their sleep. Now, he lived in a large villa with a spacious, soft bed, but the woman who had endured all those hardships with him was now sleeping beside another man. She had left him 4 years ago with a secret, and he hadn't seen it, hadn't been able to keep her by his side. 4 years later, he had broken her heart, pushing her away into someone else's arms with his own hands. This time, it seemed he really couldn't get her back. But why, when she was the one who had left him first, was he the one who ended up being abandoned in the end? Shane didn't go back that night. He lay on the small, old bed without a blanket. It grew colder as the night wore on. He curled up, hugging himself. This night felt unbearably long. The next morning, Shane was woken by his ringing phone. He groggily answered, and his assistant's anxious voice came through. "Mr. Sterling, the wedding is about to start. Miss Sinclair is desperately looking for you. Where are you now? Do you need us to come and pick you up?" His muddled thoughts instantly cleared. He remembered. Today was his wedding with Penelope. He must have caught a cold last night. He pressed his temples, but a dull ache began to throb in his forehead. His heavy breathing was so noticeable that even his assistant on the other end of the line detected something was wrong and asked with concern, "Mr. Sterling, are you all right?" "I'm fine." Shane paused before answering his previous question. "No need to come, I'll be back on my own shortly." Even over the phone, the assistant could tell something was wrong with Shane's condition. He wasn't reassured, but since Shane wouldn't say where he was, the assistant couldn't find him. Helpless, he hung up and gave a sheepish smile to Penelope, who was waiting with a cold expression. "Mr. Sterling said he'll be back soon. Miss Sinclair, perhaps you should head to the hotel first?" Penelope was seething. She had never imagined that Shane, who had been so cooperative with the wedding preparations, would suddenly disappear on the day of the wedding. However, her expression softened slightly upon hearing that he would be back soon. She nodded and was about to leave, but at the door, she suddenly turned to look at the assistant, making his heart leap. Fortunately, she didn't make things difficult for him. She just instructed, "When Shane gets back, remember to call and let me know." The assistant nodded eagerly and saw the difficult heiress out, silently praying, "Mr. Sterling, oh, Mr. Sterling, you'd better get back here soon." After leaving Emmy Group, Penelope went straight to the hotel. The wedding dress had already been delivered, and time was running out. She changed into her dress and sat at the vanity, waiting for the makeup artist. A sense of unease began to creep into her heart. She had moved into his villa a while ago, so she knew he hadn't come home last night. And the last place he had gone yesterday was the home he had once shared with Willow. She had heard that Willow had gone home to get married. Hopefully, he just wanted to go back for one last look, to say goodbye to the past. Soon, it was the final minute before the wedding was set to begin. Penelope still hadn't received a call from the assistant. She stood at the entrance, clutching her phone, staring at the screen, afraid to miss the call. But by the time the doors in front of her opened and she slowly walked down the aisle, her phone remained silent. And the spot on the stage where the groom was supposed to be was still empty. Chapter 18, the MC awkwardly sent someone to hurry the groom along, but they returned empty-handed. The ominous feeling in her heart finally took root, turning her into a public laughingstock. Penelope didn't dare to look at the faces in the crowd. As she averted her gaze, her eyes met her father's. Seeing the grim expression on his face, her own face gradually turned pale. After another staff member returned, shaking his head and saying the groom couldn't be found, the chatter among the guests suddenly rose. "What's going on? The groom didn't show up." "No way. Didn't Mr. Sterling make a big show of his love for the Sinclair heiress just a while ago?" "Who knows? In this circle, it's not unheard of for these things to be just a passing fancy. And isn't our other star of the day known for changing partners every 3 days before he got with this one? Who's to say his previous declarations of love weren't just a whim, and now that the novelty has worn off, he's regretting it?" Amidst the noisy chatter, her father, Marcus Sinclair, suddenly stood up, walked onto the stage, and grabbed the hand of the bewildered Penelope, intending to leave. His action was so abrupt that not only did the guests fall silent for a moment, but Penelope was also pulled into a stumble. She took a few steps with him before finally realizing what was happening and hastily pulled her hand from his. Marcus turned back in surprise, not understanding what his daughter, whom he had pampered since she was a child, was doing. But she shook her head and forced a smile. "Dad, Shane isn't like that. He must have been held up by something. He told me today that he would come. Dad, let's just wait a little longer." Her words lacked conviction. Even if he were running late, he would have at least called or sent a message, not left her to face the ridicule of the crowd alone. Seeing her still stubbornly defending Shane, Marcus's eyes filled with disappointment. "Penelope, I didn't raise you to throw yourself at a man who doesn't care about you at all. If he had any respect for this wedding, he wouldn't have let this happen." At that moment, Marcus wished he could crack open his daughter's head to see what she was thinking. "And he said he would come back? Where is he then?" Penelope's face was streaked with tears, but she kept shaking her head, repeating, "He said he would come back." Looking at her, Marcus's heart sank. "Are you going to insist on waiting here and letting yourself be utterly humiliated?" Her exquisite makeup was waterproof. Even though tears streamed down her face, her makeup remained flawless. She took a step back and gently wiped the tears from her face. Her heart was full of grievances she couldn't voice, but she had waited so long for this day to marry Shane. She couldn't bear to just leave. "Dad, I'm sorry." The moment she said those words, Marcus understood her meaning. He shook his head at her. "Penelope, you will regret this." With that, he didn't insist any further and turned to leave alone. With the groom absent and the recent dramatic scene, the guests no longer had any desire to stay. They all left the banquet hall, leaving only Penelope in her white wedding dress, sitting in the front row, staring blankly, still waiting. She still couldn't believe it. She couldn't believe Shane would just abandon her like this. She had always thought he loved her, that he just hadn't completely forgotten Willow. After all, their past affection wasn't fake. If he didn't love her, then what about all those times he had called her name, Penny, in the throes of passion? Even when the MC tried to persuade her to leave, Penelope stubbornly refused. Time ticked by. The setting sun cast its light through the windows, silhouetting her lonely and pitiful figure. Finally, she stood up with a blank expression and walked out. Chapter 19, without even changing her clothes, Penelope got into her car and drove towards a place she thought she would never set foot in her entire life. She looked at the message she had just received on her phone, confirmed the address, and cautiously walked into the apartment complex. The complex was old and desolate. Penelope, in her luxurious wedding dress, looked completely out of place. The apartment buildings were scattered, and it took her a long time to find the right one. She was nearly harassed by some local thugs, and in a panic, she took off her high heels, threw them at them, and ran for her life. Perhaps blinded by the glittering crystals on the shoes, the thugs thought that given how expensively she was dressed, the shoes must be worth a fortune. They took out their phones to check and were stunned by the long string of zeros after the price. Fleeing in panic, Penelope didn't care about her torn wedding dress as she ran forward. By a stroke of luck, she saw the building marked B2. Feeling like she had just survived a disaster, she walked in. There was no elevator, so she had to climb the stairs. Back then, to save money, Shane and Willow had rented the top-floor apartment that everyone else avoided, because it was freezing in winter and scorching in summer. By the time Penelope reached the 7th floor, barefoot, she was surprisingly grateful that she had thrown away her high heels. Otherwise, she would have had to either carry her heavy dress and heels or climb 7 flights of stairs in them. There was only one door on the top floor. By the time Penelope reached it, she was gasping for breath. She first tried to push the door open, but it was locked. Then she switched to knocking. The pounding sound of her fists on the rusty iron door echoed in the stairwell, and she shivered involuntarily. When the door remained closed, she knocked again. This time, the door finally opened. Inside, as expected, was Shane, who had been missing all day. His chin was covered in short stubble, and his tired eyes were bloodshot. Seeing Penelope standing outside, he was momentarily stunned. "How did you find me here?" He seemed completely oblivious to her torn wedding dress, her red-rimmed eyes, and the fact that the woman before him was supposed to be his bride today. The moment Penelope saw Shane, all her grievances surged, and tears instantly streamed down her cheeks. With her red eyes, she looked up at him like a pitiful little rabbit. "Shane, today was our wedding. Why didn't you come? Why did you leave me all alone? Why did you humiliate me like this?" Faced with her barrage of questions, Shane's mind seemed to shut down. He frowned, taking a long moment to process what she was saying. "The wedding. Was our wedding today? Sorry, I think I forgot." Seeing his slow reaction, Penelope finally realized that something was wrong with his condition. She reached out and touched his forehead, only to find it burning hot. She panicked. "Shane, you're sick. Why aren't you at the hospital? What are you doing staying here?" She tried to pull Shane downstairs, but he seemed glued to the spot, refusing to move. "I'm not going. I have to wait here for Willow to come back. Willow will be back soon." Chapter 20. Penelope froze, her eyes wide with disbelief. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. So, Shane didn't go to the wedding today because he was here waiting for that bitch, Willow. "Shane, wake up, she abandoned you 4 years ago no matter how long you wait here." It won't change the fact that she doesn't want you anymore and has married someone else. In her emotional breakdown, Penelope's voice became shrill and piercing. The sound made Shane's brow furrow. He instinctively pushed her away, not realizing she was standing right at the top of the stairs. Caught completely off guard, Penelope was pushed backward and lost her balance, tumbling down the stairs. A neighbor from downstairs, annoyed by the shouting in the non-soundproof stairwell, was coming up to complain. As he rounded the corner, he saw Penelope roll to a stop in front of him. Thinking he had stumbled upon a murder scene, his legs gave out, and he collapsed to the floor. Upstairs, Shane, in his delirium, had no idea what had happened. He only knew that the annoying person in front of him was finally gone. He didn't care how she had disappeared. He simply turned, went back inside, and closed the door. At the stairwell landing, Penelope lay on the ground, her head having hit the floor hard. Blood slowly spread from the back of her head. She seemed to be unconscious. The neighbor, trembling, took out his phone and dialed the police. He wanted to run, but his legs were weak, and he couldn't even stand up. The police arrived half an hour later. By then, he had finally regained his composure and ran downstairs, bumping into the officers on their way up. With the police as backup, the neighbor was no longer afraid and frantically waved them over. "Officer, I'm the one who called there upstairs." The police went upstairs and saw Penelope's tragic state. Realizing the neighbor had only called the police and not an ambulance, they quickly called for one. Some officers stayed with Penelope, while others cautiously went upstairs. To push someone down the stairs and then, with a witness present, brazenly return to your room was highly unusual. Since the caller had said the suspect went into the room and didn't come out, and they had checked the surroundings upon arrival, a window escape seemed unlikely. The most probable scenario was that he was still in the room. Several officers first knocked on the door. There was no response, which made them even more vigilant. After knocking again with no answer, they forced the lock. They pushed the door open. The room was small, with almost nowhere to hide. The police immediately saw Shane lying on the bed, fast asleep. For a moment, they didn't know whether to be angry or amused. But to avoid the suspect faking it to lower their guard, several officers cautiously approached, their guns aimed at him. Just as they were about to wake him, they realized he was burning up. He wasn't sleeping. He had passed out from a high fever that had been left untreated. The paramedics, carrying a stretcher, huffed and puffed their way up the stairs. As they were about to carry the unconscious Penelope down, they saw the other officers helping another unconscious man down. "Miscalculation," one of them said. "We have 2 patients." Chapter 21, the police officer felt a bit helpless. It was the first time he had ever handled a case where both the victim and the suspect were unconscious. Both were in serious condition. One had a 40-degree Celsius fever for nearly 8 hours. The doctor said that even if he survived, there was a high chance of brain damage. In this state, even if Shane woke up, he wouldn't be able to cooperate with the police investigation. The other had suffered a severe head injury. It was uncertain if she would ever wake up. When Marcus Sinclair received the news and rushed to the hospital, he was filled with regret. Why had he left Penelope alone today? Even if he was angry, he could have left someone with her, so she wouldn't have been bullied. Upon hearing that his daughter had been pushed down the stairs by Shane, and remembering his stunt of abandoning the wedding, his anger flared. He immediately hired a lawyer, vowing to send Shane to prison. When Willow saw the news on her phone that Shane was being sued by Marcus Sinclair, she felt a sense of surreal displacement. In just 4 short years, his life had seen such dramatic ups and downs. She had witnessed him at his poorest and most desperate, so she knew he must have worked incredibly hard to get to where he was. But the news didn't reveal what had caused them to fall out so drastically. They were so close to being in-laws. Just the day before, she had seen discussions about Shane and Penelope's wedding. By evening, the headlines were all about the Z-City esports star being taken to court. Finn's chin rested on her shoulder, his warm breath tickling her neck. He unceremoniously took her phone away. "Wife, you're paying more attention to him than to me. Is he that interesting to look at?" His intimate gesture made a blush creep up her cheeks. She playfully tried to pry his arms from around her, but her efforts were futile. With a look of helplessness, she had to soothe him. "That's not it. I was just scrolling randomly and came across it." In reality, Finn wasn't a jealous person. Most of the time, he was quite rational, except when it came to matters or news concerning Shane. Speaking of which, she was curious. When Shane had followed them here, given how wary Finn was of him, how had he managed to leave them alone to talk? She was curious, so she asked. The man behind her just gave an awkward cough and didn't answer. He couldn't possibly tell her that he had been so distracted while walking with Leo in the complex that day that he had almost tripped several times, could he? He had already made a pact with Leo not to mention such embarrassing incidents to Willow. How could he possibly answer now? Since Finn was unwilling to answer, Willow didn't press the issue. She settled back into his arms. With his proactive affection lately, she was getting used to this kind of intimacy. It was close and warm, and it made him very content. Willow's fingers restlessly poked at his chest, making him shudder. He instinctively grabbed her hand, his voice growing hoarse. "What are you doing? Don't fidget." Willow looked up, able to see only his Adam's apple moving and his clean-shaven chin. She blinked, her soft breath fanning across his skin, making him tighten his grip on her slender waist. Suddenly pulled even closer to him, Willow found it difficult to tilt her head up. She held back for a moment, but finally couldn't resist asking. "Finn, why do you care so much about Shane? I've told you before, when I decided to marry you, I stopped thinking about him. We're just strangers now." Chapter 22, the moment Finn heard that name, he felt a wave of annoyance, and his voice became muffled. "But he was the first person you loved. Wife, I regret it. I regret not having the courage to catch up to you sooner, to tell you that I love you." Hearing the meaning behind his words, Willow was stunned. When she met Finn on their blind date, she had been completely honest, telling him up front that she just wanted to find someone to marry quickly. She didn't mind if there was no love before the wedding. They could be respectful partners or try to build affection afterward. In any case, her reason for starting this marriage was also to end another relationship. If he ever fell for someone else, he could just tell her, and she would agree to a divorce without any fuss. There was only one condition. No matter whether they developed feelings for each other or not, he could not cheat on her. Finn had agreed, but he had one condition of his own. He said he wouldn't cheat, but his family had no history of divorce, so after they were married, she was not allowed to fall in love with anyone else either. It wasn't a great condition, really, because no one can guarantee they won't change. He could promise not to cheat now, but when the time came, who could say for sure that he wouldn't fall for someone else? At that point, stubbornly holding on to the marriage wouldn't be a rational decision. But as she looked into his eyes, a strange thought came to her. She thought, I can trust him this one time. After all, if he really did fall in love with someone else, he would be the one most eager for a divorce. So, Willow had agreed. From a confirmed relationship to marriage, the process was smooth. Proving her words true, she wanted to find someone to marry quickly. From the blind date to the wedding, it had been just one short month. The timeline was rushed, but the wedding he had prepared showed no signs of being hasty or perfunctory. Every detail was filled with the planner's care and attention. At the time, Willow had thought Finn was also nursing a broken heart, perhaps had been abandoned, which was why he had proposed the no-divorce rule. She had never considered other possibilities. His proactive and affectionate behavior after the wedding, she had assumed, was just him choosing to cultivate their relationship, as they had initially agreed. That was why she hadn't been surprised by his willingness to give her space to talk things out with Shane. But now, hearing his words, she realized she might have misunderstood his intentions from the very beginning. Seeing the look of astonishment on Willow's face, Finn didn't know whether to feel helpless or something else. "I thought I was being pretty obvious. Wife, I've been in love with you for a long time. It started in high school, the year we met. It's been 13 years now, 4,885 days. It's a pity I was too timid back then. I didn't dare to take a single step closer to you, not even by the time we graduated." 4,885 days. Hearing that number, Willow was momentarily stunned. She remembered her time working and fighting her illness alone in a foreign country. She had also counted the days, one by one. Those days were so hard to bear. Sometimes, seeing the count approach 1,000, then reach it and finally surpass it, she would think, maybe I should just give up. When her stomach cancer flared up, she would lie on the cold, hard bed, writhing in pain. The long hours of work required a lot of energy, but the cancer made it hard for her to eat anything. Even when she forced herself to eat the scraps of food she had scavenged to stay alive, she would often end up throwing it all up. Every time she looked at her pale face in the mirror, she would think, maybe this is just my fate. Just over 1,000 days had been so unbearable for her. How had he gotten through his 4,885 days? Chapter 23, Willow reached out and gently touched his brow, then wrapped her arms around his neck and pressed a kiss to his lips. Was that time very hard for you? But it's okay, I'm by your side now. Finn was stunned for a moment, then a wide smile spread across his face. Yes, it's okay, you're by my side now. So those past 4,885 days don't matter, because we'll have many more 4,885-day periods together in the future. He held her tightly in his arms, his heart nearly overflowing with happiness. His past timidity had cost him 13 years with Willow. This time, he would be brave enough to embrace every future 13 years with her. The Sinclair family's lawsuit against Shane never made it to court. The main reason was that after treatment, doctors confirmed that the prolonged high fever had caused severe, irreversible damage to his brain cells. When he woke up, he exhibited abnormal emotional and behavioral patterns. With no family to care for him, it was highly likely he would be sent to a long-term care facility. Moreover, he was not conscious when he committed the harmful act. After mediation, the Sinclair family settled for monetary compensation. However, Penelope had suffered a severe head injury and would most likely remain in a vegetative state, with little hope of waking up. The day he regained consciousness, Shane looked at his phone. There were no missed calls or messages. He lowered his head with a bitter smile, mocking his own foolish hopes. Of course, he thought, Willow is married to someone else now. Why would she care about what happens to me? She probably just scrolls past the news with a laugh, if she sees it at all. Due to Shane's condition, the majority of his shares in Emmy Group were sold off to the Sinclair family, leaving him with just enough to cover his facility fees. The Sinclair family became the largest shareholder of Emmy Group overnight. Fortunately, Marcus and his wife only despised Shane, so besides a change in ownership, there was little impact on the employees. Penelope never woke up, becoming a permanent vegetable. On the day the leadership of Emmy Group officially changed, Shane was admitted to a long-term care facility. The news of this outcome sparked a wave of sighs and laments. No one had expected that Shane, whom they had watched rise from a nobody to an esports star and founder of his own gaming empire, would meet such a tragic end. It was, as they say, a matter of fate. Willow hadn't seen this news. Her knowledge of the events was still stuck on the last report about the Sinclair family vowing to send Shane to prison. It wasn't until she received a message from an unknown number that she realized Finn had secretly blocked Shane on her phone and deleted any news about him that popped up. She found it a little amusing, but when he blinked his eyes and begged for her forgiveness, she couldn't help but ruffle his soft hair and let it go. After all, who could resist a big puppy dog wagging its tail? The message from the unknown number was from Shane. He said he wanted to see her one last time before he went into the facility, and that after that, he would not bother her again. Willow didn't refuse. After all, they had years of history. Even though things had ended badly, she couldn't just ignore him completely. Her conscience wouldn't allow it. If she were to trace it all back, she was the one who had hurt him first, which led to everything that followed. Besides, it was just one last meeting. Chapter 24, to appease a certain man who had a tendency to get jealous whenever Shane was mentioned, Willow brought Finn with her when she went to see him. By the time they reached Z City, it was the next day. The care facility was located in the suburbs, a quiet and serene environment perfect for recuperation. Unlike the other patients in their hospital gowns, Shane was wearing the same sharp suit he used to favor when he was a CEO. Finn, walking behind Willow, saw his attire and couldn't help but make a snarky comment. "If you're sick, you should be resting. What's with all this fancy dress-up?" The sour smell of jealousy was so thick it was almost tangible. Willow chuckled to herself but had to admit he was right. He had used his illness as a reason to see her one last time. Why was he still putting on a brave face now? But Shane shook his head, his eyes fixed on Willow. "Even if I'm sick, I still want to show you my best side. Even if we might never see each other again, I don't want you to see me looking ill." "Willow, you felt the same way back then, didn't you?" His words stunned Willow for a moment. Then, a smile of understanding spread across her face. Of course, a business tycoon, even in retirement, would have better sources of information than an ordinary person like her. She didn't know how he found out, but it was all in the past. Now, when it was brought up, she could just smile it off. Willow, I'm so sorry that I didn't trust you enough back then, and that you suffered so much because of me later on. Look, I suppose I've gotten what I deserved now. Shane gave a self-deprecating smile. When he saw Finn's immediate tension upon hearing she had also been sick, and how Finn instinctively wanted to ask but was stopped by Willow's reassuring hand, a mix of relief and bitterness filled his heart. See, she didn't tell him either, her own husband. But ultimately, the person who could stand by her side now, whose emotions she was attuned to and quick to soothe, was no longer him. Why did you ask me here today? Seeing him was an act of final decency. Willow didn't want to stay too long. At her prompting, he bit his lip, suppressed the bitterness in his heart, and took out a bank card, holding it out to her. Please take this money. Consider it compensation for the medical expenses for all the harm you endured when you were my secretary. Willow looked at the card for a moment, then finally took it. After all, the harm she had suffered because of him was real. Accepting this money meant they were finally even. Thank you. Willow and Finn left. Shane watched their retreating backs, their hands clasped together, and couldn't help but think that if only he had given her a little more trust back then. If he had, he wouldn't have pushed her away when they met again, even though he still loved her. And if he hadn't, the person standing by her side now would be him. Far away, Willow was facing Finn's interrogation. He was not happy that he had learned about Willow's illness later than Shane. Oh, it's all in the past, and I'm completely cured. See, I'm perfectly fine now, aren't I? Her explanation did nothing to soothe him. It only made him more upset. Finally, he pulled her into his arms, his voice tinged with disappointment. Then, wife, let's make a promise. From now on, no matter what happens, you can't hide anything from me. She patted his back reassuringly, her voice soft. Okay, from now on, whatever happens, we'll face it together. But we also have to agree that you won't bring up my past anymore. All right, whatever my wife says goes. Should we go see how much money is on the card? What's there to see? Wife, I can earn money. I might not have a lot, but it's more than enough to take care of our little family. Really? Really?